best entertainment on the earth. Tune in for Comics with Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. Here's a good email. It's a recent email. I usually scroll down. I try and get down, but every now and then I'm just lazy. Usually when I'm driving the car also, and I don't want to scroll down while I'm passing someone on the freeway. Doesn't seem safe. Anyway, this is a mail about writer and artist interaction. So it says, "Hey Perch, I remember watching a video about George Perez, and the host mentioned that, at least back in the day, artists didn't want to draw team books because it invariably calls for more characters, i.e. more work, without additional pay. Not being a comic professional, I had no idea this was a thing." It is a thing. It's been mentioned. It's hard to tell if this was industry-wide or just the opinion of a few people. But there was this case where there was at least, I don't know, I want to say for a brief second, but probably went on for years, where there was talk about should artists make more if it's a team book. I think that the challenge with the argument on its surface is that whether it's the X-Men or whether it's Spider-Man, if you're drawing Spider-Man swinging around the city or you're drawing the X-Men in their mansion, I'm not sure that just having more characters in the X-Men really entailed that much more work. I'd love to hear from some artists to know if that's true. But I mean, if you've got Spider-Man in his rogues gallery and all his sporting casts and his this all these cityscape kind of things, I mean, I guess you could, if you were going to half-ass it, you could half-ass it easier on a Spider-Man book than a team book. But even there, I'm not sure just adding more characters in a team does much. But this was a thing, and people were complaining about it for a while, and it seems like they kind of got over it. So anyway, the mail continues. So my question is, what is it like when a writer gets a little too unrealistic with their expectations of the artist? Does the artist go to the editor, or do they try and talk it out with the writer first? One thing comics can do that movies can never do is have no budgetary restraints. A writer can say Doctor Doom kicks open the throne room door only to be confronted by every Avenger ever. But those Avengers are also each an individual mechs, and outside the window you see Galactus is landing with his army of cosmic truffle-sniffing pigs, and it takes him maybe 60 seconds to write it out, but the artist has a minor heart attack thinking of having to draw it. I kind of want to see that scene now. Anyway, wasn't sure if there are any notable stories of this happening in the past. Thanks as always. So, generally speaking, from what I've heard, when the artist gets a page that's just too, over the top, or the artist feels is just confusing and insane, the artists typically like to talk to the writer. Now, it doesn't always work that way, and sometimes the writer's inaccessible. And we heard from Richard Case talking about trying to get in touch with Grant Morrison back in the day, and they had a shared payphone they had to use. And so generally, though, the artist likes to talk to the writer and work it out between the two of them. And from everything I've seen and heard, most writers are sympathetic and open to the idea. They're collaborative. They will change the page. If the artist's like, I don't know how to draw this, I want to do it right, but I don't know what you got me doing here, the writer will work with the artist to get a better page or to clarify what one's done or so on. So that's generally what I've heard happens. In some cases, the writer's not accessible, and then people are going through the editor. And from what I gather, when that's the situation, the artists tend to get that's almost more frustrating than anything the writer has asked them to do. When the writer and the artist are being separated by an editor who's kind of sitting in the middle and coordinating the conversation between the two, that's when I hear that's the situation I've heard most from artists saying that they don't like being there in that place. It's too slow and it's irritating, and they hate it. But generally they can work it out. I think that there's been cases. I know that there are some artists who complained about Mark Waid once upon a time for doing too much. I know Kurt Busiek has had some people have complained that he has done too much on the page, or just made things difficult in terms of the complexity. The other one I've heard is occasionally you hear that writers don't put enough detail, and I guess not occasionally. I hear that one more than too complex. So that's a case where the writer's material is so sparse and just so there's not enough information for the artist to really tell what the writer's after, and so they have to do a lot of follow up and try and guess at a lot of what's on the page. Been a bunch of kind of fairly bigger stories about that. Dan Slott had that that accusation thrown at him quite a bit of being somebody who would leave kind of too much for the artist to try and figure out. It's a pain and a hassle for the artist to do that. So I think those situations do exist, and uh, again, it kind of the best comics tend to be ones where the writer and the artist have a good relationship, and they are in sync together, and they're working as a team, and there's just a good collaboration between the two. I think that's that every time that they've had that kind of behavior, the result is better. I got all flustered with that. I don't know why. Uh, but generally speaking, if a team is established, they can generally work out any problems. I know that some books there are artists who just don't want to do it, but usually less again for complexity and more for just interest. I remember talking to Brett Booth, and there's characters that he just does not want to do. I forget who I think I suggested like I'd like to see Brett Booth do. It's either Gambit or Longshot, but the idea behind it was I would like to see Booth on a character that's traveling around the world, so it gives the chance to let Booth kind of go crazy with some different environments. And I think this is never going to be what Booth is primarily praised for, but I find that when he does rich backgrounds, he does he just does really cool locations. He obviously has very dynamic imagery, and that's the really cool stuff in his work. But I like when he takes characters to different places, and so I've always wanted to have a project where you put Booth on a book, and you have him do like a tour of the DC universe or the Marvel universe with a character. And I think I'd said something along the lines of like, if you really want to do a Gambit book, put Booth on it and let him take Gambit around the world and see kind of different team ups, different villains, kind of really get a chance to kind of do a greatest hits through some of the characters, not unlike Hush, but have it be a global traveling thing. Anyway, as I recall, and this goes back a couple of years, Booth is like, I would have no interest in that project. I don't like the character. But so yeah, that gets to be a problem if the artist does not like the character. I may be remembering aspects of this wrong. I don't remember what character I pitched to Booth, but it was just not one he wanted to do, and that's fine. I think the importance there is Booth is both confident and knowledgeable enough to know that's not the character he wants to do, and so he doesn't sign up and then phone it in like we've seen in other places. He actually opts out of the work before it begins, so we don't get a project he has zero passion for. So I think these are all kind of the different areas. There are writers out there that some artists just will not work with for this reason, either because they're unprofessional, they turn in scripts late, they write very vague scripts that cause the artist a lot of headaches. There's increasingly starting to become some editors that I'm hearing more and more people won't work with. And these are editors who turn in changes at the last second, who will alter art without really talking to the artist first. There's becoming a growing blacklist of editors who do that. Maybe that's a video for another time, but when I say blacklist, I mean just artists who say, I refuse to work with that, and then the word gets around that this isn't somebody to work with. Anyway, a lot of stuff going on there. But there you go. That's more or less the answer to your question. I think I'd love to see, of course, dynamic pages. I think it would be interesting if I always go back to if we were able to give the artists more money, and if we were able to get the schedule, plan out things more in advance, so you give people more time, would you get just much better results? A lot of comics lately have just blank backgrounds, a lot of foreground character action where they're using the same pose over and over again, just for speed of kind of cranking these books out. And I always come back to it feels like they're just doing too much. When you're putting out 80 plus books a month, do you have the mechanism, the operation, the company for quality at this point? I don't know that you do. So does everybody just start to write and draw down to the lowest common denominator of what they can achieve? Again, feels like it. But there you go. So thank you very much for the question. And yeah, it's I should do a video at some point about kind of artists who have said, nope, I'm not into this anymore and I'm leaving, and walk through why. Maybe I'll do that. some point if you're interested. Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening.